Namaskar. Welcome to Prakash on Basics. Today, let's try and understand why do we have four Vedas and not just one single. As per tradition, something that I mentioned some time back, Brahmadev is said to have given the total knowledge to Vyas. He split it into four parts, reorganized the whole thing, and gave it to his four disciples. This resulted into the four Vedas that we know of: the Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samveda, and Atharvaveda. If we look at the content, we can easily understand the logic and the reasoning as to why they were split into four. Let's try and see what this is. The initial basic purpose of the Vedas was to compile a lot of knowledge, and this covered different areas: the ruchas, the mantras, the suktas, the prayers of variety of gods was one aspect. Uh, it was also meant to explain the procedures of the various rituals, the yadnas, and the daily obligations that every grihastha or a family person was said to have. Then there were invocation techniques that were to be utilized. People have also had to know the setup, the sequencing, the do's and don'ts during the yajnas, what fruits they were to get, who was to get them, who was to perform these. All this information was compiled, as I told you in the beginning. There were approximately 11,000 plus mantras in this collection. And then there were specific mantras for specific functions, for specific rituals, for specific yajnas. So it was common sense to separate them out conveniently. The primary prayers, the invocations, the mantras, the suktas, many of them in their earlier form were in the initial type of Sanskrit, and all these formed what we now know as the Rigveda. They were poetic, they were descriptive, like the Usha Sukta. Like the Purusha Sukta, they were to give the nature of the social structure. The Nasadiya Sukta, for example, explained their ideas about the origin of the universe. And wealth and related areas were covered in areas such as the Shri Sukta. So naturally, these were a part of the Rigveda. The mantras dealing with the yajna procedures, the invocations, the preparations were all separated out into the Yajurveda, the second Veda. Many of these mantras were in meter. Typically, they are known as the chand. There are a number of them. I'll talk of them sometime. They had to be sung with proper intonation, with proper pronunciations, with a set of people grouped together, deciding on the area and location where they were sung, Gramya Gayan, etc. And these were very specific in nature. They were the same mantras that were there in the Rigveda, but had details of how they were to be sung. And this process of singing was known as Sam Gayan. Such mantras then were recompiled again in a separate Ved known as the Samved. Many of them are from the Rigveda itself, but deal with the process of singing. All these contained mantras, some of them were in prose form, some of them were in meter and could be sung very properly. Rhythmatic prose was often used in their formulation. Karmakand, as I told you, is the activity based part. The separation of all these mantras into the Karmakand also led to the development of the Jnana Kanda corresponding to each of these Vedas in each of their own areas, obviously of higher intellectual level corresponding to every aspect that was previously discussed. Uh, since some of the mantras were interpreted in a different manner, in a different context, they had to be included once more in that particular Ved. So you'll also find some of the mantras from the Rigved in the Yajurved. These three Vedas were known as the Ved Trayi, that is the triad of Vedas. They mostly catered to the elite class. They concentrated on the top echelon of the society, the ones who were keen on moving up the ladder of social structure. From small leaders to tribesmen to kings to emperors known as the Chakravartin. Each one had to perform some yajna or the other to move up the ladder. From simple farmers to small businessmen to shreshtis, which were big financial units. All these people performed a variety of yajnas. But what about the knowledge for the common man? What about them? And this was not the only body of knowledge that had been compiled and was being compiled. The society itself at that stage was rapidly evolving. Vast new areas were looked into and new information needed to be compiled. Important information about the medicines, the behavior norms, the rules and regulations governing villages and cities, the dharma concept itself, the kings and their duties and commitments, the wives, their duties and commitments, a variety of spells, a variety of kinds. Many of these things had to be recompiled. Also, there was one more issue. Non Aryan tribes gradually got absorbed into the society. They had their own gods, their own traditions, their own knowledge. And that was also quite significant. So that too had to be included. Good ideas from other non Aryan people then related to plants, to city structures, to dwellings, the way to live, the dresses, etc., had to be assimilated into the original lot of information. This vitally important information then was completely separate from the first three and was compiled in an independent treatise which gradually gained the status of a Ved. And this then is the Atharva Ved. Finally, this was a Ved for the common masses. So we had the first three for the elite classes and the fourth down to earth practical Ved giving a lot of information for the common man too. These were the four Vedas then. But then with Yajurved comes another story. I'll tell you the lore itself first. The disciple of Vyas who formulated the Yajurved was Vaishampayan. He was its main proponent. He had a nephew by the name Yadni, a very bright person. He was also a student, but he was a little too smart for his age. So naturally, it led to conflicts. He commented on the rituals carried out by some of the other students, and the complaint went to Vaishampayan. He got into argument with Vaishampayan, also his uncle. Uh, the conflict grew, and finally Vaishampayan said, "You return all my knowledge that you have taken from me." Spit it out, he said. Well, that was what was to be done. So Yadnivalkar spat out all the knowledge and walked away. Now, this was knowledge, very important for everybody. So Vaishampayan told his rest of his students, it's better that you gobble up all this knowledge. Uh, so the students took the shape of birds known as the teeter birds and gobbled up all that knowledge. And this developed into what is known as the Taitiriya Samhita or the Taitiriya part of the Yajurveda. What happened to Yajnavalkya? He walked off looking for another teacher, got in touch with the sun god Surya and requested him to give him the knowledge associated with the Vedas. The sun god obliged, and in the form of a horse, which is typically referred to as a Vaji, he gave the knowledge once more to Yajnavalkya. From Vaji, so this Samhita is known as the Vajasneyi Samhita. And this form of the Yajurveda is known as the Shukla Yajurveda, the bright Yajurveda. While the previous one, that was with Vaishampayan and his students, is known as the Krishna Yajurveda or the dark Yajurveda or the older Yajurveda. Actually, the invocation mantras are poetic in nature, and the procedural ones are in rhythmic prose, and they are interspaced between each other. And that's what happens in Krishna Yajurveda. What is done in the Shukla Yajurveda is the poetic ones are separated out and the prose ones are kept separate. This makes it a bit more convenient to learn, study, and implement. So, this is a reorganized, refined form, more poetic in some places. And this is the bright one, and so the Shukla Yajurveda. While the previous one with mixtures, the earlier one, the more dominant one to a large extent, was the Krishna Yajurveda or the darker one. Well, this then is how the four Veds were formed, with an additional split in the Yajurveda as the Krishna and the Shukla Yajurveda. If you found this information useful, please pass it on to your friends, tell them about it, like and subscribe to this channel. Enjoy listening to this, enjoy passing it on to others also. I hope you have gained some insight into the Vedic structure. We'll go into more details next time. Till then, namaskar.